Welcome to Finding Your Light Live. Here we are. Happy Friday, everyone. This is where we go through and we find tools, modalities, and practitioners or providers that help you live and shine brighter. I'm super excited to have this lovely lady with us today. Backstory, we've actually been friends for a number of years. Her name is Katie Ford. And when I met her, she wasn't doing what she's doing now. And so, Katie, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Katie Ford, and I'm the executive director of Truth Be Told. We're an Austin nonprofit that's been around for 2 decades. We support women. We provide safe community and healing programs to women during and after incarceration.
Yes. Yes. So me and Katie knew each other. We were trying to figure out before we got on how long we had known each other, but we're guessing roughly a decade.
Yeah, about a decade.
Yes. We were on this amazing boat trip together, and we were cabin mates sailing through Tonga.
Yeah.
That sounds all weird, but it was amazing.
Yeah. I was a last minute entry on that trip. There were 8 of us on a catamaran. One of the crew members backed out, and I got an invitation to fill in. And so you and I were cabin mates, and
we were.
I knew of you, but we weren't we were in the same social circles, but we had never directly hung out. And so that was like, hi, I'm your cabin mate in the middle of the South Pacific. We're going to be sleeping together for the next 8 nights. And I'm a mouth breather. I sometimes snore. I'm really sorry.
But it was amazing. And I think we were the only 2 single women on the trip, which is like, I was like, what are you doing here? We're both like, we're single. We're just hanging out with our friends.
Honestly, that was like, I look back on that time and it feels like a dream. That was just an amazing, God, what an adventure. I feel really that you got to do that.
Yeah.
Anyway,
very lucky.
That's how we met. That's the origin story.
And then we circled back. Actually, we were connected by Angie, who helps me with Illuma still, but she used to work at the front desk, and then now she helps me with all of our marketing. And she was connected with you because she's now very public about her story, and she was incarcerated in her early 20s for a drunk driving accident, which, you know, the reality is 99% of the people I know could have been her. You know, I definitely could have been her multiple times. And then she got connected with you afterward as part of her kind of healing journey to help, you know, kind of support women who are still incarcerated share their stories. So I would love to hear the backstory about how did you get tied into Truth Be Told, and then what specifically is the work that you do with those women?
Yeah. Well, first, I definitely want to give a shout out to Angie, who she is absolutely amazing and was one of our volunteer facilitators for a while. She was facilitating the Let's Get Real class, which is a reentry, reentry class, but very on social emotional, because nearing your release date is not always good news. There's a lot of anxiety that comes up when you realize that you're about to oftentimes return to the environment that led to everything that got you incarcerated in the first place. So Angie was very instrumental in helping craft that curriculum even more, and really appreciated the time she spent with us. But my journey with Truth Be Told, so, you know, I come from a journalism background. For over 20 years, I was a writer and editor. On staff sometimes. I was with the Austin Business Journal for a while, but then I freelanced for most of that career. And so time was my own, and I decided that I wanted to get involved in volunteer work. And I was living in a rent house on the east side of Austin. And that journey started with being a mentor for the Seedling Foundation, which pairs mentors with a child who has a mom or dad who's incarcerated. So I was a seedling mentor for a handful of years, really enjoyed that. But my truth being told, I always felt a little bit of reservation because I don't have children of my own, that a little bit of fish out of water, and gosh, I hope I'm saying and doing the right thing and not making it worse.
Don't worry, parents feel that way all the time.
But I was at a mentor training, seedling training, and I met a woman who was on the panel of experts talking about the value of mentorship. And she was a Truth Be Told graduate.
Mm.
And when I first saw her on the panel, I just assumed she was yet another school teacher or a principal or something. But then she introduces herself and says, "My name is Rutanya, and I am formerly incarcerated, and I know the importance." Well, actually, she said, "I know the importance." Yeah, I'll never forget this because she really changed the trajectory of my life. Meeting her did. But she said, "I know how important mentorship is in a child's life because my own kids had mentors in their lives when I was locked up for 15 years.
Mm.
And you could have heard a pin drop in the room. And she mentioned Truth Be Told, and I had heard of Truth Be Told because the magazine I was editing, or editorial director of the time, at the time, the owner, his wife is one of the founding women of Truth Be Told. So I had heard about, oh, this is a nonprofit my boss's wife founded, but didn't take it personally as anything that needed to involve me. But when I met Rutanya, it was like I call it an echo effect. You hear about the same thing through a totally different channel. And to me, that's like, my intuition, I need to pay attention to why is this coming up for me,
Mm-hmm.
So I went up to her afterwards, we chatted, and she's the one who said, we host program graduations in the prison after the women go through the course. And we invite volunteers to be respectful witnesses at the graduations. So I signed up to attend a Truth Be Told graduation, and it really awakened me to a larger cycle, insidious cycle that's happening, that's trapping and derailing generations of girls and women. And once I woke up to that cycle, I couldn't go back to sleep. I couldn't close my eyes to it. I took it very personally, and I knew I wanted to be a part of it. And unlike my work as a mentor, when I was in the prison gym, listening to the women stand up and tell the story of what they believe put them on a path to prison, what I was hearing is the same things that the children we were mentoring went through or are going through. And I had this aha moment of, oh my God, this is little Abigail all grown up. Mm-hmm. Like this is the same girl, and she's being trapped in this cycle. It's intergenerational trauma, because what she was talking about was, childhood abuse, abandonment, chaotic upbringing, and then getting involved in, basically never having a safe place and a safe space to heal from the trauma that she's enduring, and so what she's, she finds coping mechanisms that lead her down pathways that get her incarcerated, because all of it is, it's addiction, it's substance abuse, it's numbing the pain, it's numbing out, or being involved in relationships with men or partners who recreate the violence. And and so at any rate, the thing is that when in them telling their truths, what I also heard was empowerment and dignity and self-respect, and a desire to show up differently, first and foremost for herself. That's key. First and foremost for herself, but then also for her family, her community, moving forward in life. And that fired me up. And I felt, as a woman who doesn't have kids, and has also gone through her own things in life, things that I could relate to, that the women talked about, even though I had never been incarcerated. I've been in, I've had other trauma in my background that is similar. But I could relate to this, and I wanted to be a part of it. Like whatever that shift, that fundamental shift, and that healing, those seeds of healing that were planted in the Truth Be Told classroom, I was like, I need to support that. So my original idea was super practical. I was like, maybe I could write copy and content for their website, or edit a brochure. I was like, just being real, not being creative. But the woman who was running the program at the time was like, oh, we do these exploring creativity workshops, and we're looking for a writer who could facilitate a 2-hour experience in creative writing, And so, having never facilitated anything before in my life, I said yes, thinking they were actually going to give me a 2-hour lesson plan. Like they give me my script and I go in like, okay, fine, I'm going to do it. I'm kind of adventurous at heart. But no, there was no script. This was, no, you're the creative. You know, we bring in artists to share their craft, and you're doing it. So I cobbled together a 2-hour journaling experience and went in there. And Alli, it is the weirdest thing. And I actually feel a lump in my throat talking about it because I don't understand it, but it was only my second time to go inside a prison. I'd never facilitated a group experience before. And I felt so plugged in and right where I was supposed to be. I had this undescribable connection to the women in the room. We engaged in like incredible sharing, and I drove back to Austin. This was in the prison at Lockhart. I drove back to Austin afterwards, just like, I need to be doing this, you know? And so I became one of those volunteers that just got deeper and deeper into the work. You know, I thought maybe I'd do another workshop, but I ended up training to do our Talk to Me writing curriculum, which is a 17-week journey. Because I was a freelancer at the time and owned my schedule, I had the freedom to just take off every Thursday afternoon and drive to Lockhart and facilitate that class. And I did that for 7 years. And then, I could go on and on about that. It was after 7 years, I just started getting this really strong feeling from something greater than me, like the universe, like what I do as a volunteer on Thursday evenings inside a prison needs to be what I am doing all the time. And me being an editor and a journalist and a writer and like editing content and managing magazines and publishing and all that, it just started feeling like an ill-fitted old uniform that I couldn't wait to like, you know, shed. And you know, when you get a truth that starts as a little thing and it just gets bigger and bigger, there starts to be a disconnect between your outer self and your inner self that feels really uncomfortable. Like who you're supposed to be, or expected, who you're expected to be versus who you really are.
Yeah. I mean, that's like the whole butterfly effect where, you know, you go in the cocoon and like everything had prepared you to be to this next version of yourself. But you get to that breaking point where you're like, when am I ready to shed what I've been in order to like use what I've learned to step into the new person that I'm going to be? And it's, you know, for most people, I got to say, most people ignore that. A lot of people, because it's, you know, it can be scary. Like you had a paid you know, you had a comfortable life, you had a paid gig. Now you're going to go work for a nonprofit. I'm sure some people are like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Like you're working. But you know, you were really called to something. And I think, it's really beautiful that you know, it was this process where you really kind of got in there. And people so many times say like, how do I know what I'm supposed to do? And I was like, you have to just start with what you're interested in and dive into it. And I said, it will figure itself out. You need to know what the end point. I mean, when you started volunteering, you didn't have it in your mind, oh, I'm going to take over this and grow it, you know, and do all this stuff. Of course, you were just like, yeah, this is my passion. And I think for many people who are kind of in a normal day-to-day 9-to-5 life, they think like, how would I start working in my passion if I, you know, and I'm like, just go do one thing about it. And I was like, it can unfold in some time period. And I think that's an also beautiful thing to share with people about your story.
Yeah. I think an ongoing theme that honestly, I'm still living it today is I could have never imagined. It's like I'm saying yes to invitations and opportunities that are right in front of me, but I could have never imagined that ripple effect because, you know, because it wasn't even stepping right into becoming executive director of Truth Be Told. It was actually me leaving my contractual work, editorial work behind to start the Healing Trauma Project. I literally was like, what is the one thing I can do in my backyard? And what was really in my face, glaring in my face was, after holding safe space for 7 years as a Truth Be Told facilitator, listening to women talk about what they believe in their hearts, what led them to prison, like the experiences they had, things that happened to them that shape the way they show up, the way they see themselves, the way they see other people, that they look back now and reflect and say, man, that experience was a turning point. But then also, what's my role in this? What decisions and choices did I make along the way? So it's those experiences and those decisions together that what brought me to where I am today. And after listening to those stories for 7 years and hearing over and over again how much abuse and trauma is in that storyline, in that narrative. I mean, it's the exception where that is absence. It's just always there.
Oh yeah.
We basically have women inside who are suffering from, they're trauma survivors. Many of them are suffering from PTSD or symptoms of PTSD, and we're putting them in a traumatizing environment in the name of public safety and rehabilitation. It is severely flawed logic.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I just suddenly got really passionate and forgot my train of thought.
No, you were talking about starting the trauma work in your backyard.
Oh, yes. Thank you. I just, and there was not a single class offered on that unit. And by the way, this is widespread national, that trajectory, that cycle. But what all I knew was Lockhart Prison at time. And so there was not a single class focused on healing from trauma, anything about trauma-informed care, nothing, not a single thing. And so my one thing, my one next move, next step, was to make sure that a class is offered that involves healing trauma. So I researched curricula out there, found Dr. Stephanie Covington's Healing Trauma, Brief Intervention. It's a 6-session course and focuses on the brass tacks of what is trauma, how does it affect you emotionally, physically. It goes through the biology of it all, and then it really, really focuses heavily on emotional self-regulation, recognizing your triggers, and grounding and self-soothing exercises. A real succinct curriculum. And so I got trained in it and got the warden's permission to facilitate classes, and I raised money in the community to pay me to do it so I could continue paying my bills, because those weren't going away. But I knew I had to leave the old uniform behind in order to have the time in my day to raise the money to go teach the classes, to get trained, to train others. I wasn't going to do it alone, so I was training others to do it with me after I got trained. So all of that, I couldn't do that and manage magazines and have deadlines for writing this article. I had to let all of the knowns go. And so 2017 was a really wild ride.
Yeah.
Really wild ride. But it led me to where I am now, and that desire that I had to do this work full time, I'm in it. Yeah.
I would love to hear some of the experiences of women going through the trauma work, because I do think that is such first off, just absolutely mind-blowing that that's not something that's readily discussed in something that's framed as rehabilitation. Like, if you think you can rehabilitate anybody without actually being able to help them process trauma, you're kind of a lunatic. And it's something we see every day, though. It's trauma. People have heard now of trauma, but I mean, I'll tell you, we still have patients every day at the clinic that come in and they say, I'm depressed. And then I'm like, okay, well, let's actually talk about, how did this happen? Like, you've been chronically depressed for 20 years. That doesn't just happen. Like, something happened to you, like your nervous system and your brain have now decided that this is your resting state. We have to unpack what happened and how did you get there? And we still have a large percentage of the population that would be like, oh, it's not trauma. And then of course we start doing the work and they're like, oh yeah, well, I never really thought my parents leaving me was trauma, or I didn't think that this, like, I should be over that. That happened to me when I was a kid. Like, you just get over it.
Right.
We just move on. Seriously, I have that same conversation with my mother, which is like, she had some trauma from her father. And she was like, why can't I just get over it? I'm 65. And I'm like, because that's not how trauma works. You know, but again, it's an education gap for a lot of the population, and especially certain populations where mental health isn't even discussed. Trauma isn't even discussed.
There's a huge cultural stigma too about, you know, you don't need to be talking to other people about your business. You pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You know, it's definitely, there's cultural barriers too to really thick stigma on any kind of counseling, therapy, things like that. I'll never forget in the classroom one time, going through this flow chart of the traumatic event happens, and then like what happens in the brain, what happens emotionally, and how it manifests, what it looks like in behavior, what it looks like in feelings, what it looks like in thought patterns, how trauma infiltrates all of those things. And a woman in the class, she was so mad, she was shaking and crying. I mean, it was just such rage that I could tell it was taking her a lot to bottle. And what she had to say in that moment was, why didn't anybody tell me this sooner? Like, why did I not have access to this sooner? She said, I was a traumatized child. Nobody ever told me that. All I heard was, I'm the problem. I'm the bad seed. You know, and shamed for it and punished for it, you know, and she's like, and I have to come to prison to learn this, you know, and to recognize myself and to get the tools and, you know, all of this. So it's really a disservice in our criminal justice system, our criminal legal system, to not acknowledge the root cause of behavior that is getting people, you know, locked up. Not to mention the prejudice and the bias and the racial
stack on top of everything else.
Lenses on top of that, right?
For sure.
But not acknowledging the trauma and then putting them in an environment that echoes the very same abusive messages that they adored, which is, you have no power. You don't matter. Your body's not yours. You're less than and deserve to be treated less than. You know, all these. We're just throwing fuel on the fire. It's not rehabilitation. But you know, and when you approached me about wanting to do this, you were specifically wanting to talk about the healing power of storytelling.
And how that can change that pattern and interrupt that pattern for people.
And you know, it took me several semesters to really trust the process, and that it could be as simple as creating safe space to tell your truth, to tell your story, uncensored, you know, and to have that truth received and held by women who are also committed to a healing journey and have been given tools to know how to communicate and give feedback safely, and how transformative that simple act can be. You know, but I would see it. I would witness it in the classroom every semester. Literally visible changes in how a woman carries herself and holds her body as she walks into a room and sits in a chair. The expression on her face. You know, to be able to finally liberate yourself from the darkest things that have been holding you prisoner and have been controlling your thought patterns and your perception of the world and your perception of the self, to be able to speak to all of that and have women say, I see a really brave woman. Thank you for sharing. I connect with, I admire that. I empathize when you said, this also happened to me. In other words, you're not crazy. I'm not judging you, and you're not alone. That right there plants such deep seeds for healing. It doesn't fix everything. There's no silver bullet. You know, you and I have talked a little bit about that, but in terms of setting the groundwork for a whole new way of showing up for yourself and for your life, you know, rewriting a narrative.
And that's what we, see all the time is like people don't realize that they have this whole life that has created this narrative and they're a character in it. And thus they play this part in this story that has been not only that they have lived, but then they're experiencing through the perceptions of others, which is a huge part of that experience for a lot of people is like, you're not only the label that you give yourself, you're the label that everybody else is giving you, and you're reacting, you're creating this persona either for or against that in this lifestyle. And then you want to have this change. And it's really such a huge part of it is like, you have to rewrite your story. Like you have to be the owner of it as opposed to the,
I quote Brene Brown. Sorry, pardon? I was going to say, I quote Brene Brown, or we do quote Brene Brown a lot about the, this isn't verbatim, but the gist or the idea is that only when we own our stories are we empowered to write new chapters. And that's like, that's the core of what's called it's our signature curriculum. It's called Talk to Me. And the women in the very first class named it Talk to Me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that is actually, a big part of my story was, especially around my eating disorder and my healing journey was, I, like many, wanted to skip and not tell anybody, just get better and not have to tell anybody. Like there was some way to heal where nobody had to know that I was ever
private in your own little corner.
Yeah, I'll just get better. Nobody will know. It will be great. And then, of course, after that fails 100 times, you're like, okay, actually, the main way to step out of shame, because that's what that is. Trauma for so many of us is carried around as this secret shame thing that, God forbid, if anybody knew what a horrible person I was, or that I did this, or that this happened, I would be labeled, a fraud or a slut or the myriad of labels that people give us. But then owning it and coming out and saying, no, this is actually something that happened to me and I'm not a victim to it. I'm going to use it as this post-traumatic growth moment, which I think is what y'all are really doing, is allowing people to actually say like, it's amazing that you're here. Number one.
I can't tell you how many times I felt that and toward women I journeyed with in the classroom. That's one of the unique things about our Talk to Me curriculum as facilitators journey alongside the women. We also have to explore in a metaphorical sense what it is that, what is imprisoning us in here and in here, and how do we get there? For those of us who are facilitating who do not have lived experience of incarceration, because we do have, we are growing our pool of what we call peer facilitators, so program graduates who are now facilitating. But for those of us who do not have, physical incarceration experience, we write metaphorically. So
yeah, and I just think, I think Brene Brown's work, I think that's why it spoke to so many people, because it really was. It was the Gifts of Imperfection was the game-changing book that started my whole healing journey. And then Rising Strong was the thing that really propelled me to start owning, because she's like, you either own it or you sit inside of it. Like, and that's what you got to step out. And it's amazing when you do, and you do in the right safe space, which is what y'all create. And you finally really feel seen and heard and cared for, that you can then use that as this powerful like fuel to push you forward into this other person that you're becoming. And I just think it's so beautiful that that's kind of what you see every day.
Yeah. Well, and many of the women, a growing number of women who go through the program, they're using that also as a pathway to advocacy. So we've dubbed it the graduate to advocate pathway, because many of they learn to tell their story in the classroom while incarcerated as a modality of healing. That's the primary objective. But a growing number of our graduates organically are feeling inspired to continue to tell their truth out here in the free post-release. as an advocate, storytelling for advocacy to improve, to reimagine justice for women, to improve outcomes in the Texas criminal legal system for women. And so that has been a really powerful pathway that has come out of our programs, because, anybody can, the policy analysis, the drafting of policies and the analysis and all of that it's obviously all necessary, but what's missing out of all the statistics and facts is the human face, the human narrative, the story behind why this bill needs to become law. Mm-hmm. And that's where women who have lived experience of incarceration are the most powerful advocates. They need to be at the table. Their voices need to be centered. And so, when I became executive director of Truth Be Told, one of the things I had in my mind was, I want Truth Be Told to become a thought leader in these spaces about, reimagining justice in our country. And when I say the organization, Truth Be Told being a thought leader, what I'm really talking about are the women who are graduates of our program being the thought leaders in their communities.
Yeah, because really, us hearing from the people who are having the experiences is the thing that's going to change the mindsets, I believe, of everything. That's why I feel like people coming out and talking about their mental health is so important. That's why, people coming out and talking about their psychedelic experience is important. Right. People starting to be real proponents of what's worked for them is so important, to break the stigma barrier, to help people understand that there's different paths to healing, to help us really relate to each other and not feel so alone and kind of siloed in these small groups of nobody will really understand me. I think we all feel, so alone sometimes. And it's like, if people would just open their mouth and be like, listen, I've struggled with all of this stuff. That's why I'm out here talking about it. It really is such a big change, and especially in, I've had multiple interviews now with mental health providers of color. And it's such a huge, important thing for people of color to come out and say, listen, this was my trauma. This is how I'm going to therapy. These are the things I'm working on, because, even they will say over and over again, in my culture, or how I was raised, or in my social group, it's still stigmatized. I have a really good friend who's a Black male therapist, and he's like, my parents still think it's crazy that I'm a therapist. They still don't get it. Him and his sister ended up being therapists, which I think is hilarious. Yeah. And he was like, but it's so important that we get out into our community and really talk about why we need to heal our collective trauma as people of color. Of course, last year it was the hallmark. Let's just all feel the, collective trauma of everything that we've done to people of color.
A racial reckoning, for sure.
Oh, for sure. But then also to just have this real reckoning that there's huge groups that need to do collective trauma healing. And I just think, it's slowly happening with organizations like y'all's that are going into places and helping people, just basic education of this is what happened to you, and this is why this is hard, and this is the outcomes that are happening. And I don't, even explaining that trauma creates, this is what it does in your body. This is how it physically shows up. And people are like, what do you mean? And I'm like, chronic pain is tied to trauma,
Oh, so many things. One of the things I was going to, circling back to the, storytelling as a healing modality is, when I've heard many of our graduates say that when they do turn to advocacy work after their experience of incarceration, that every time they engage in an advocacy effort or initiative, whether it's speaking in public, doing an office visit with a rep, or even just some coalition building and envisioning and helping a policy think tank decide what their priorities are going to be going into the next session. Anytime they engage in that, it is healing. That is continuing to heal their own trauma, because it is giving purpose and meaning to to what used to lock them up inside in their hearts and their minds, that this is actually my superpower.
Yeah.
It makes me an important person at the table because I know firsthand what the solutions need to be and what the problems are and what's not working, you know? So what used to shame me is actually my superpower.
Yeah, I think that is so important. It also evens that playing field back out, because for so many people who have been through things, you know, Western medical model, Western mental health model, the prison model is this top-down approach of you're the bad person or the broken person or the wrong person, and we're the right person, and we shall tell you and control you into what you're supposed to do. And when you can, and it's just such a disempowering model, because you feel like you are completely disempowered, whether that be through your mental health or through, you know, you're incarcerated. And when you can finally own it and empower yourself that I am the one that is going to heal me, I am the one that is going to get me this next step, it completely changes the dynamic. And then it feels like you're back at this even field with people and going like, okay, listen, I went through some stuff, but I'm empowering myself to own, you know, what has happened to me. And I think that's a really important thing that y'all also do, is the ownership in, you know, everybody has messed stuff up. We can own it and be like, that doesn't mean anything. You're not,
doesn't have to define a person. And that also that equal playing field of, I'm not coming in, like I used to say when I was facilitating, because now that I'm executive director, I don't facilitate anymore. Yeah. That was a really hard transition for me. My last semester was spring 2019. And of course, we are blocked from being in the prisons right now because of COVID. That's a whole other story. We could go like a whole another hour on. But, and I do want to mention though, what we're doing at some point, you know, in the interim. You know, that power dynamic of, you know, I used to always say, you know, I have no delusions that I have the power to fix you. That's not my agenda. That we intentionally call ourselves facilitators, not teachers or instructors, because we simply are there to hold safe space, to share tools and say, you know, here are the tools. Pick the tools that work for you, because healing is a very subjective and personal journey, but to allow each woman to have her own experience of what learning to tell her story, and befriend it and sit in the middle of it, you know, what that is for her, you know, and so just to hold space for that. I really have always loved that model that Truth Be Told, the founders of Truth Be Told, made sure was part of it. And that's not just my personal opinion, but that's also listening to the women who have gone through our program. It's really a game changer and a head turner for the women who are very used and accustomed to volunteers coming in to save them or fix them, you know, which great intentions, but there's a lot of unintentional judgment and shaming going on in that power dynamic. And Truth Be Told is very different from that, and it's an empowering, strength-based model, you know, approach to this.
Well, that's interesting. That's exactly how Illuma's run, and we use almost the exact same language. It's like, we're not going to fix you. This isn't going to fix you. We're not going to fix you. You're going to fix yourself. We're here to hold space for you and make a safe space that you feel comfortable to process and go through whatever you need to go through in order to heal. We have this tool that's going to help facilitate that. We have other people that can help, you know, work and do processing work and integration work with you. But this is you, and you're going to heal yourself. And from that, you're going to be super empowered that you know you did it. You know that you are powerful and your body can heal itself, and you have that right and you have that ability.
Yeah, and by the way, some of this you may not connect with. Like, it may not work for you. It may not be your thing. It may not be your jam. That was especially something that I emphasized when I was doing the healing trauma course, which now that's the healing trauma brief intervention got pulled and merged into Truth Be Told when I became the executive director. So that's now under our umbrella. But that's something I always say is that, you're going to learn a lot of tools to self-regulate and ground and center and all of these things. And, keep what works, put the things that work for you in your toolkit and leave the rest behind. It's a super personal experience.
Yeah. So we have a few minutes left. I would love for you to share with us what is happening during COVID.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah. So typically, what's happening in normal times is we have in-person programs at 5 correctional facilities in Central Texas for women. We work exclusively with women, and all of that programming has been temporarily suspended since March of 2020, when we first made the decision that it was not a good idea to go inside, because at that point in the game, as far as we knew, we were the ones who could be carriers and bring it inside, because they were contained and had, as far as we know, didn't have COVID. So to go inside was irresponsible. And so but then the very next day, the Texas Department of Criminal Justice put out an announcement that all facilities were closed to visitors and volunteer-run programs until further notice. And that is still true today. So since March, we have not been able to do in-person programs. So we pivoted very quickly to a mail correspondence program using the U.S. mail system.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we have no delusions that it is on par with being in person and doing this healing work. It also doesn't look like the Talk to Me curriculum because, again, just thinking ethically and responsibly, doing that very trauma-focused work, not in person and not necessarily having a safe space is not responsible. So what we did is we, part of the Talk to Me curriculum, the back end of the curriculum, like the second half of the semester, is all forward facing, using creative methods, expressive methods to continue to heal and do self-discovery work and self-growth work, and also learning self-care tools. Everything that we do is based on what we call a toolkit called the 4 C's, which is community, creativity, communication, and caring for self. So it's a 16-week program that each month, it's 4 months long, it focuses on one of the C's. And so every week we send in tools and activities and exercises and readings that focus on those themes. And then intermittently we include stamped or metered envelopes for our participants to share their work and what's coming up for them back with us. And we have a team of our facilitators have been amazing and sticking by our side through this whole time. And so they are reading every single piece of mail that comes in and personally responding to the work. So there's a 2-way correspondence, and so the women know that they are still being seen and still being heard, and we have not forgotten. And it is, we are still using our sea of creativity to figure out how do we stay in community with such severe physical barriers. And we've been getting really great feedback from the women inside that, that we are continuing to reach out and engage in this way. For the time being, this semester we actually started a whole new cohort of women, and then the women who had been in our program in 2020, they now are in a alumni group and they get monthly mailings. So we've got a weekly program going on and a monthly program going on, and that's just what's going on inside. So also during COVID, we've noticed that our graduates who are post-release back in their communities, many of them are being disproportionately impacted by the economic crisis and the health crisis, and they're needing community and support more than ever. So we have deepened our programs on the outside, our Beyond Bars program, to offer virtual workshops and retreats.
Oh, good.
So the women in our program who want to continue to connect with each other can and have that safe community. We actually started offering healing trauma on the outside virtually. So that same curriculum that we used to do inside, we're offering it over Zoom now. And our second and third cohort just started last week.
Nice.
Yeah, so we have found a way to move on.
A way to work it around at least.
And to continue to fulfill our mission during this time. And, our expenses have changed, and our revenue has changed, of course, income has changed, but, oops, I need to stop, decline, don't call me. But at the end of the day, I just feel so much, I'm just in awe of our staff and our volunteers and how everybody has rallied to make sure that we don't miss a beat and that we continue to offer that safe community and those healing programs. And it doesn't look the same right now, but it's still impactful. It's still impactful, and we look forward to reuniting one day. But right now, it doesn't look. I'll just say personally, I don't foresee being able to go back inside this year.
Yeah. At the earliest, maybe at the end of the year, but probably
maybe.
Not soon. Yeah. So if somebody is interested in what y'all do, or do y'all have volunteers are you looking for volunteers?
Yeah. So right now, the call for volunteers is we're always interested in meeting and building relationships with new people who are interested in the work and keeping that pipeline full. But we're not actively trying to recruit volunteers right now, as you can imagine, because we're down to that skeleton. Yeah. So that's the reality right now. But we are always looking for community partners who are also engaged in healing work, to possibly be guest facilitators or guest speakers and so forth. Yeah. Oh, by the way, the mailman's coming. My dog might bark.
Don't worry.
Yeah.
My dog thinks mail people are very dangerous. The Amazon guy is a very dangerous man.
Yeah, she saves me every day. She's that 1,000. He tries to come in, she barks like crazy, and he leaves. And she's like,
I won.
Save the day again. I won. And she was quite quiet this time. Thank you, Martha. You must be realizing that I need you to be quiet. But anyway, so the volunteer call is not, we're not really, but we are growing our board of directors. We're particularly looking for those who have finance, to possibly a treasurer position, background, fundraising skills, and then board service acumen, just, experienced veteran board members who know what it takes to serve on a board. And then also always just donations. We're always, I'm always driving. I wouldn't be doing my job as executive director if I wasn't always, driving donations. And of course, you probably know that Amplify Austin Day is coming up March 5th and 6th, which all the nonprofits in Austin, everybody doing such good work, most, over 700, 800 maybe even engaged in that 24-hour giving day. And truth be told is participating in Amplify Austin Day. And so you can basically go to amplifyatx.org or just Google Amplify Austin Day. And you'll go to the platform and you can look up Truth Be Told on their search engine and find our page and donate there. And the thing is that what I always find curious is that it's dubbed as, or it's advertised as a 24-hour giving day, March 5th to 6th. But you can technically donate right now, like the gates are open. So you can go to our profile right now and donate, and it's going to count toward our giving day total.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
Love all that.
Yeah.
Do you have any final thoughts or anything to share?
I just want to thank you for the opportunity to be in conversation with you, Alli. This was really nice. It was very nice to reconnect with you after all these years and to be able to talk about these things, because I know you have such a passion for the healing process as well. And I just appreciate you extending this platform. You're a gem for doing that.
Oh, well, I'm so happy you were able to join me. And I just think this is such a powerful thing that you're doing. I'm super proud of you and the organization for the work y'all are doing. I think it's like vitally needed, of course. So it's a great opportunity. And I think it's just a great learning moment for everybody. I mean, healing through storytelling is a real powerful tool, and it's something that you can use no matter where you are in your life. And so I think it's really important to get that out there.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, guys, we'll see you next week.
Okay, bye everybody.
Bye.